Well, in confirmation this past week, we talked about the idea of time, about how we make choices surrounding how we use our time, and about how time itself is a precious gift from God. We even drew out a weekly schedule, right, with lines and boxes. We plotted out how we use our time and asked questions about it, like, what are the reasons behind your schedule's choices? What pressures, what organizations and expectations influence your choices of how you use this time? The confirmands produced a long list of answers and a long list of pressures that included, can anybody guess what the number one pressure is for a high school student? Did anybody say school? Homework. Oh, well, that homework is on the list, yes. School was number one. Personal health, good grades, sports, a vast variety of other big commitments, homework, and the list went on from there. But two students wrote something different. Instead of listing off the pressures that they faced, they wrote their desires for what they wish that they had. What they do not currently possess in their schedules is what they wrote down. I don't really have time to do things for myself, wrote one student. I wonder how many of us here can feel that way sometimes, like we have made no time for ourselves in our overburdened schedules. Who here has spent this last month penciling in or adding to your iCal, honestly, personal time, or self-care, or meditation time? What about downtime? Anybody? Oh, we got a couple hands. Very good. Another student simply wrote, I wish I could pencil in time to sleep because I don't have enough time to sleep. I am perpetually tired. Who here might resonate with this desire? Who here is tired? Who here on this chilly evening is weary after completing a day at your full-time job or whatever else occupies you? Who here is guilty of cutting back on sleep in the name of productivity or out of sheer necessity to make ends meet, to follow through with important commitments? Who here has grown tired? You know, we don't spend a lot of time thinking about time. For many of us, we are most aware of the concept of time when we're late, right? When we've become overbooked, when we try to pencil in just one more appointment in between other appointments on our calendars. Well, then on the other end, for some of us, there is a different struggle. Perhaps we are swimming in a sea of free time, and days turn into weeks and weeks into months as we exist and we wait and we watch, unaware of the vast and precious gift that we have been given. I have had at least 3 retired members of the church come to me this last month and say something like this. You know, I've had to plan things for myself to do, otherwise this time just gets away from me, and before you know it, the whole day's over and I'm going to bed. Yet all of us, those with extra time and those without any available time, confront the same pitfalls as Jesus' disciples did on that road to Jerusalem. We must confront spiritual distractions. The disciples entered a Samaritan village. Now, Samaritans would have been foreigners, right? They were unwelcome people. They were despised people, even suspicious people for the Jewish community at that time. And Jesus led his disciples there on a mission. And to the credit of his disciples, they followed. They sought to reach out, to share the good news beyond familiar boundaries. And what happened? The Samaritans cast them away. Lord, should we call down fire from the heavens and consume them? Asked his disciples. And Jesus, who continued to have his face set on Jerusalem, he turned to them and he rebuked his disciples. You know, when we reach out in kindness and compassion, especially in an act of faithfulness, it is not easy when we get turned away, right? When we become jilted. We can become so distracted and directed by our own anger to that situation that we forget our original mission altogether. Over the years, I have seen many versions of this play out on mission trips with students and adults. We have gone to do good things, spread the love of God on these youth mission trips, and been met with some form of rejection, but usually the rejection stems from our own expectations. Expectations like, well, I think people should be expressing a little more gratitude for us with how hard we're working. Or maybe, why aren't the homeowners out here all day long, every minute, working side by side with us just as hard as we are? I got to be honest, I've come away frustrated myself. I've had my expectations let down on these mission trips where I was trying to follow Jesus' lead. We were once giving a ride home to children from a sports camp, and one of the kids, as one by one, the kids got out of the van until there was just one child left, and we were just driving around. It's just up around the corner, he would say. Now, this was a hot day. It was a sweaty day. We were thirsty, and we were tired, and we just kept driving. It's just up to the left. No, it's just up to the right. No, just turn left one more time. After driving around circles around this small town more than one time, I finally turned around and I cut him off and I said, "You aren't pulling my leg, right? Because you have now been driven around this whole town multiple times like it's a roller coaster for you. But this is no joke for us. We're trying to help you and you're just shuffling us around town." And the boy looked at me and he laughed. "You're such a sucker." And he jumped out of the van and ran off. So my weary, sweaty face must have clearly spelled out my anger, because the other leader leaned over to me and quietly said, "You know, it's okay. We didn't get him home, but I guess he did get something he wanted. He got to stay in the air conditioning." He was right. That boy may not have had air conditioning in his home. But the truth is, our anger can burn so hot when our expectations are dashed, can burn so hot that we become distracted from the nature of our original mission. In the disciples' case, their anger caused them to contemplate burning people alive instead of leading people to the life-giving message of the gospel. So I wonder, how has your anger steered you away from sharing the love and forgiveness of Jesus Christ when you have been turned away in one form or another? Besides the anger of rejection, Jesus lifts up one more form of spiritual distraction. He mentions possessions. Foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. Jesus owned nothing. Jesus relied upon the goodness and hospitality of strangers, people of faith. He had no material possessions that anchored him in one place. He had no financial saving plan for future purchases or retirement. He did not show that he coveted or envied or lusted after any material thing, really, any occupation, any title, any position of power. I was talking with a clergy friend the other day. She has served the church in Wisconsin here for 18 years and just accepted a new call out of state. And I asked, "Oh my gosh, aren't you excited? Are you worried? What's going through your head right now as you go and start your whole new life?" "Well," she replied, "I'm mostly overwhelmed about having to move all my stuff in boxes. I suppose that's the one reason I've stayed here so long. We just have not wanted to move all of our stuff in boxes across the state." Jesus says, "No one puts a hand to the plow and looks back is fit for the kingdom of God." Even clergy, responding to God's call, put their hand back on their beloved possessions, their plows, and they look back. They're overwhelmed. They're daunted. It's a daunting task that Jesus is asking us to do when Jesus leads us to go on mission to respond to our call. Perhaps this is no surprise at all, because I am sure that we are all have found ourselves at one time or another more preoccupied with our things, the material possessions and powers of this world, than with our relationships, and with our love of God or love of one another, or a desire to have Jesus lead us. Pastors, faithful Christians, we are all called to live lives of open hands. We must keep our hands open when anger causes us to desire to close them and to make fists. We must keep our hands open instead of yielding to our desire to cling to our material possessions. Having open hands has long been a part of the process that many saints and mystics have called practicing detachment. So friends, during this Lent, during this time of reflection, this time of celebration and forgiveness, I wonder what distractions we must practice becoming detached from. What is distracting you in your walk with God? What holds onto a little too much of your heart and your attention? What occupies your time such that it's hard following Christ's lead? What fear, what source of anger, what possession has taken enough of you such that you have grown weary, you have grown tired of clutching so tightly to it that you long for a good night's sleep instead of having the energy to follow Jesus? Everyone should have those purple slips of paper. I'd like to invite you to take that purple slip of paper out right now. I know I have one somewhere. I'd like for you to take and write on that piece of paper something that is distracting you, that you find a heavy distraction in your life. You can use the little pencils in the pews in front of you. Let's just take a moment, silently reflect on that, and we will be bringing those prayers forward later to leave at the foot of the cross.